Community Heart Media. Your voice, your heart, your opportunity. Welcome to tonight's show.
Community Heart Radio, and we've got a fantastic show as usual tonight, and it's all about youth loneliness. And we've got a couple of experts in the room, Julio, but we've all been a bit lonely this year, don't you think, mate?
Yes, we have. Yes, especially now coming out of lockdown and learning how to be with people again. I think that's the biggest issue we got at the moment. So hopefully we'll have some advice tonight, and off we go from the program.
Well, I don't know where all my friends went. I used to have some friends in 2019, but don't seem to have too many left after 2 years, mate. I don't know what's going on.
True. No, well, I've got the same situation too. I think it's just recognising without a mask on. I think that's the biggest concern as well.
Oh, maybe that's the issue. I just don't actually recognise it then, my friends. Well, look, we've got, as I said, we've got a great show tonight. We've got two very special guests. Tonight's sort of in partnership with Big Brothers, Big Sisters and the Youth Are Not Alone project. And we've got the person heading up the Youth Are Not Alone project, Emily Matthews. Wow, in the studio tonight. Good evening, Emily.
Hi, thanks so much for having me on. I'm Emily. I'm the Youth Are Not Alone leader, and I'm also in my third and final year of my Bachelor of Public Health and Health Promotion, which is super exciting. We have a really good show tonight, so thanks everyone for coming along.
Wow, Emily. So you're not only leading the Youth Are Not Alone project, but you're also smart. You're doing your degree in public health. Fantastic.
Thank you.
And Emily, you've had a bit to do with Big Brothers, Big Sisters as well, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2015, I was a part of the Young Achievers program, which is where you get matched with a mentor based on the career that you're interested in. So they can give you advice and mentor you to help you sort of achieve your career goals. And I started that program in 2015. And then last year in March, I started volunteering for the Youth Are Not Alone project. And then September of last year, I started working for Big Brothers Big Sisters. So I've had quite the journey with the whole Big Brothers Big Sisters team.
Oh, that's a fantastic story, Emily. So you're a young person in the program, and now you're actually helping the program so it can help other people. Hey, that's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It feels nice to be able to contribute to a community and give back.
Well, look, and tonight, do you want to explain what's going to happen tonight and what the Youth Alone program is all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Youth Are Not Alone project is a project led by youth for youth, and our purpose is to help reduce loneliness amongst young people and try and connect people and try and make a good community of people, probably mostly young people. And we have a podcast called Mind the Gap, which you'll be hearing a segment from today.
Mind the Gap. Now, Gwen, I gather that's where you fit in terms of Mind the Gap. Good evening. It's great to have you on the Community Heart Radio show tonight. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. And yeah, thank you for having me. And it's really good to be here.
And
so,
how do you fit into all this?
Well, I work as a counsellor as well as being an educator. So I've worked in schools since 2004 as a teacher, and I've worked across all the year levels from primary up into upper secondary. But in 2016, I moved into mental health, and I now have my own business. And so I actually primarily work with adolescents and children within the realm of mental health, but also work with individuals as well.
Fantastic. Oh, we're looking forward to hearing a bit about your story. I mean, how do you think the last couple of years has gone for young people? I mean, it's been horrific, hasn't it?
It's been pretty brutal. It's been a really brutal experience, I think. It's interesting that I had a certain number of clientele drop off, and they were the children who had difficulty with socializing issues. But the clientele that increased during lockdown were those who felt that sense of disconnect and that loss of identity because they were no longer connecting informally to their teachers and to their friends, and everything had been formalized for them. And that became a real stressor for many of my clients.
Wow.
Yeah, well, look, it's going to be good to hear a bit about it. We've had a few people, Julio, say good day. Milton,
Yeah, got Milton says hi to Emily and Gwen, and also we had Belinda. And she's saying hello to you, and great to see you all tonight.
And don't forget, you can put your messages on the Facebook pages. We'd love to hear from you tonight. Quite interactive, although we are going to go into a little segment at 8:15. So, look, it'd be lovely to see you. And Juliana's here. One of our celebrity guests is here on the show, and it's great to have Juliana here. And she's going to be one of our celebrity stars next year on the Community Heart show. Great story Juliana's got, and thanks you for listening as well. We've got some really good listeners tonight. So, Gwen, what's your message to students as they sort of share their struggles, their story of the last couple of years? What's the main message you're trying to convey to young people today?
Well, today we are going to be talking about loneliness, but particularly how when we're feeling immersed in that feeling, how it can be quite counterintuitive to then reach out. But that's exactly what we need to be doing.
So if you're feeling down and alone, one of the best bits of advice is actually do something about it. Yeah.
As we'll talk about this a little bit later, but it really is to do with the sense of disconnect. It's to do with the sense of isolation. And when we're feeling like that, it's just a bit too easy to dive under the doona and stay there. But we really need to make that effort and make ourselves a bit vulnerable and get out there and try to make a connection.
Yeah, Emily, have you tried to get under the doona in the last couple of years? I mean, how have you coped the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think the way that Gwen described it before, brutal, is definitely one of the ways that do come to mind. There has definitely been some times where during the past 2 years with the lockdowns, I've definitely wanted to crawl under that doona and not come out until it was all over. It definitely also seemed like it wasn't ever going to end. So I can definitely feel those feelings of loneliness throughout the lockdowns. But I do also feel that reaching out, although it can be really hard, is definitely the way forward.
Yeah, well, Julio, I was always wondered why you never answered your phone, mate. Is that because you sort of switched off yourself, buddy, during the last couple of years?
Yeah, I sort of have, yes, and I think I entered my own little world sometimes. I think it's a normal thing now where you just you're being isolated, forced isolation, and then you get used to that and you just want to be alone half the time. So plus the Zoom meetings is absolutely a killer now. So I think just getting away from any devices, watching movies, I think is the best thing to do. But in some cases, it could be the worst thing for you as well.
I wonder if any of our listeners tonight have gone under the doona or how they coped with the last couple of years. I mean, it feels like it's all over. I'm hoping it is, but how have you gone over the last couple of years? What's been your strategy? Gwen's got a couple of strategies. She thinks we should be proactive, and even though you don't feel like ringing someone up or visiting someone, sort of push yourself a bit and do that. That's going to be the best thing. Have you got any suggestions on what you've done? Just put it in the chat. Or you got any questions of Gwen or Emily? We'd love to hear from you tonight on 98.9 Northwest FM. It's Community Heart Radio. And I tell you what, we've had some great shows. Tonight is really already feeling like it's going to be another fantastic show. Now, Emily, tell us a bit about this Youth Are Not Alone project. What are you trying to achieve through the project?
Yeah, so we want to help build a community for people to feel connected. We actually started this project at the beginning of March 2020 before COVID, and we had set out our goal to help reduce youth loneliness and feelings of that social disconnection and isolation. And then it became clear as we started working on the project last year that the feelings of loneliness because of the COVID-19 pandemics and the ongoing lockdowns had just increased and been completely exacerbated. So we hope to make a positive impact on people to be proactive about their health and their mental health. And we hope that we can encourage people to reach out for support when they need it. And we hope that we can provide a safe space for people to grow and meet new people.
I just think it's fantastic. Julio, this is a bunch of young people that are helping other young people. You can't get anything better than that, can you?
No, that's true. And also the viewers are putting out heaps of comments out too. So you got Marnie. Found exercise a great distraction from loneliness during lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
Good old exercise, yes.
Yes, and Tanya. So stay connected with family. That's important too, I think.
Very good. And
Daryl
Gardner reckons we've got a great show.
Yes. And Belinda again, it's been difficult with everyone. I'm lucky to be surrounded by amazing family and friends, and we try to each other through those challenging patches, take my dog for a walk, and also always be good mood booster.
Well,
So
fantastic, Belinda. She got some good points there, and having fantastic family, exercise. Look, the thing that I really thought they were saying, Julio, was staying tuned in to 98.9 Northwest FM Community Heart Radio has helped get through people the last 2 years. I can't believe how many people are saying that.
Yes. So we got Daryl listening from New Zealand. There you go.
Well, we're an international show now. Daryl
That's
Gardner
it.
from New Zealand. Fantastic. Thanks, Daryl. It's great to have you here tonight. And I tell you what, mate, we're just making a big difference on the radio. Now, we're going to be leaving our great listeners soon. It's been a great little start. A lot of interest tonight in Emily and Gwen. We're going to be leaving the show and handing it over to Emily, the leader of the Big Brothers Big Sisters Youth Are Not Alone project, which is a group of young people trying to address the huge issue of youth loneliness. And Gwen, just before I go, it is a big issue, this issue of youth loneliness, isn't it?
Oh, it certainly is. And what can happen, though, as I mentioned, we get consumed by this feeling and we stop thinking proactively. And so all those things, I love the fact that someone mentioned exercise. We've got all these lovely feel-good hormones that we have in our mind. And when we're sitting at home being quite stationary, they don't get released. And so being able to exercise, being able to move, being able to get outside, being able to connect, having a pet makes a big difference too. Thus the boom in people getting dogs and cats. But having that connection is a big thing. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, how important it is to have a sense of connection.
That's true. So, Mark, you need a cat for your doona.
I do need. Now, Tina's added another comment here just before we go. Music changes your mood as well. So that's very true, Tina. Put the radio on. I'm a bit of a listener to Smooth FM. I don't know what Emily listens to. What do you listen to on the radio, Emily?
I don't often listen to the radio, but when I do, I like Nova and Triple J. But I honestly don't mind anything, whatever's the first station my finger lands on.
There you go.
Yes. Well, now we're having a podcast segment in 3 minutes. Again, what's the podcast called and what's the purpose of the podcast?
So it is the Mind the Gap podcast. We want to answer questions that youth feel have been left unaddressed, potentially throughout their formal education, or questions that young people feel they can't ask their parents or people in their school or their personal lives.
There you go.
Fantastic. And Juliana's put a little comment up here. Emily, how do we support young people who have psychological disability and lonely? There's a lot of people with a disability out there that are desperately lonely. Maybe Gwen and Emily are going to cover that in your podcast in a few minutes, but a very good question.
Yeah.
That is a really good question. I don't know if I would be the best person to answer that question, but I think, again, reaching out to supports that are personalised. I know there's NDIS as well. That could be really helpful, but I think it would be important to consult somebody who is specialised in the area.
Just Gwen, any comments from yourself?
I think this is where social media, we might love social media, hate social media. Social media actually does have its benefit in the sense that there's quite a few support groups have sort of are there on Facebook and other platforms, especially for marginalized groups, especially for people who have that sense of isolation or separation. And so it's because of groups on Facebook, for example, where people can actually join groups and they can have conversations and connect with other people of, let's say, of a similar position.
Okay. Great. Now we're going to leave you now, but we're going to pick up your questions a bit later because there's one about what about young people that are naturally introverted? That's another question. Not sure who that's one from, Julio, but naturally introverted. Yeah, so I think there's a whole lot of questions out there. We're going to come back a bit later, answer more of your questions. Thank you so much for all your great comments, and we just got amazing listeners, Julio. And I'm going to exit now with yourself. I'm going to hand over to Emily to run the podcast with Gwen, and really looking forward to hearing these guys in action.
Yeah, talk to you soon.
Welcome to the first podcast episode of Mind the Gap, brought to you by Yana, Youth Are Not Alone program. Mind the Gap podcast aims to bridge the gap in knowledge that formal education may have missed and create a community that is an inclusive safe space for people to learn and grow. With your host Emily Matthews discussing with her guest the topic loneliness.
Hello and welcome to the Youth Are Not Alone Mind the Gap podcast, where we interview guests about topics that affect youth. Firstly, I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land. I'm coming to you live from Wurundjeri land, and I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. I'm your host, Emily, and today we have our special guest, Gwen, who'll be answering questions about loneliness and giving us some advice on coping through those feelings of loneliness and isolation. Thanks so much, Gwen, for coming along tonight. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Emily. Yes, and thanks for having me. Yes, so my name is Gwen. I am a counsellor, and I actually operate in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne in Croydon South. But I also work as a school teacher, so I have two professions and I like to straddle both of them. I love to be able to work with young people in the classroom, but I also love to be able to work with them in the counselling sector because we can address so much more on a personal journey in this little space that I'm in right now. I call this my concrete box, my office, and just to be able to really help people on their journey with their lives.
Thanks so much for coming along and for helping us dive into this issue of loneliness. The first question I will ask is, what is loneliness and how many people are affected by it?
Well, loneliness is a feeling. I think that's really important. There's a few things I'm going to probably repeat a fair bit tonight, and repetition is good. And the fact is that loneliness, as it is a feeling, but it's a feeling that accompanies a sense of being disconnected from other people. It's a feeling that accompanies with feeling that state of being alone. The Black Dog Institute suggests that it's negative feelings that arise when our social needs are unmet. I would like to go a little bit deeper than that, and I will be using the word disconnect quite a lot tonight because I believe that loneliness has a lot to do with a feeling or a sense of disconnect. But not just disconnect from others. I think it has a lot to do with feeling disconnected from ourselves as well. And again, just to quote the Black Dog Institute, they suggest that 1 in 3 adults are affected by loneliness. As far as how many young people it affects, later on we're going to talk about what's happened during lockdown. I've got other figures on that one. But it is an emotion.
Yeah, absolutely. So what does that feeling of disconnection from others and for yourself feel like? And how can young people identify whether they're feeling lonely or not?
Yeah. Well, loneliness, again, as a feeling, you could ask people, how to describe it. Some people might describe it as a feeling of emptiness or that feeling of aloneness, a sense of isolation, feeling disconnected from others. But it can also, I believe it also can have a sense of hopelessness with it. So again, we're going back to this feeling, the fact that it's feeling, and I would also like to acknowledge that it's suffering. Loneliness is one of those, we call them negative emotions. Unfortunately, we've gotten to this little bit of a habit of naming some of our emotions as positive ones and some of them as negative ones. I like to use the phrase that they're unpleasant and they're unwanted. But they actually do still play a part in our lives. As an unpleasant and unwanted emotion, which I've referred to now as suffering, it's often connected to a story that our mind is telling us. But we get very caught up in the emotion and we often don't pay attention to the story that's actually feeding it all. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so interesting. I think the idea of not labeling your emotions as positive or negative, because regardless of that unpleasant feeling, those unpleasant emotions do still serve a purpose, and they are, I guess, in some way trying to tell you something, perhaps that maybe you're feeling disconnected.
Yes, absolutely. And when we do label them as positive and negative, we wrestle with them a lot more Like, this is negative. I don't want this. And so we start trying to push it away, or we start trying to avoid it. And we're doing all of these things to try and stop ourselves from feeling the emotion. And it distracts us from actually being able to become proactive. It distracts us from being asking the question, hang on, what is really going on here? What is it that I'm really thinking at this time? And it also, the other thing, when we label something as negative, we're unwilling to accept it then. And it makes us even more like, keep away from me because you're negative and I don't want you. Instead of leaning in and saying, okay, what's really going on here? What am I really wrestling with?
Yeah, absolutely. I've definitely experienced that where I've been feeling an emotion that I don't want to feel. So I push it away. I sort of go under that metaphorical doona and I try and distract myself with something else, but not actually addressing what's going on, and I'm not being proactive about it. So it's really interesting that you mentioned that. How does the experience of loneliness differ from person to person? So potentially age or sex or gender or the life stage that you're in. Does that have a difference and an effect?
Yeah, I actually, when I read this question, I thought, this is a bit of a tricky one because it's very subjective. So the experience of loneliness can differ for each person. First of all, I'd like to just mention that when a person presents, they say, I've got this, I'm struggling with loneliness, or I'm struggling with sadness, or I'm struggling with anxiety. One of the things that we can ask, first of all, is how often do you have this experience? And that's our frequency. We find out how often a person has this experience. And the other one is that we'll ask, how strong is it? On a scale of 1 to 10, where do you think it sits? And we're talking about intensity. And the other one then is duration. How long does it last for? So we'll find that now we've got these 3 different ways of measuring, or it's just a way of saying, because often people will say, I'm just really struggling with this emotion. How often do you have it? A couple of times a week. So not all the time, just a couple of times a week. But we can get very distracted by this negative element of it. And it feels like it's all of us, all of the time.
Yeah.
So that idea, that gives us an idea then that when I've been working with a client, by just being able to get those 3 markers, we can then find out how we're going and how we're tracking.
Yeah.
But for example, you ask what can some of the things that can differ. For example, if a person has the loss of a partner, now a person might lose a partner from a short-term relationship, or a person could lose a life partner from 30 years, and both of those people will experience loneliness. And yet I think it's a little unfair then to compare the two and actually say, well, that person's loneliness is going to be stronger because that relationship was longer. But we don't know what other stories have contributed to this point in time. We don't know another person's story, another person's journey that they've been on. And so we need to know or take into account the story. For adolescents, feelings can be intense. Let's acknowledge that. For our adolescents who are going through a lot of development, we've got our social and emotional development, we're still developing cognitively, we're still developing physically, and therefore emotions do run high. And for people who are highly sensitive, and highly sensitive people, that 20%, I think, is the population, then it's like our feeling dial is on high, and loneliness might be intense feelings. But it may not last long, or it might last a long time. So once again, there's those difference of scores.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, people might say, women are more built for connection, that sort of thing. Well, I think it still also comes back to how some people thrive on connection. And then when they don't have that connection, they will sort of flip to this polarity side of feeling this absence, feeling this deficit of connection. And so for that person, a sense of loneliness can be more intense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, there's a lot that goes into these sorts of questions. I think it also needs to be acknowledged too that for people who are from marginalised communities where loneliness is actually part of the community, meaning of disconnect or having difficulty finding support. Once again, if you've got loneliness and then we've got isolation on top from COVID-19, I often would describe it that we have anxiety levels, and a pandemic comes along and it just sort of pushes our base level of anxieties up even higher.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that the same would be for loneliness and other unpleasant and unwanted emotions.
Definitely. I think just going back to what you were saying about different levels of loneliness in people as well, going through different experiences in your life, I think it is important to highlight that no matter what you are going through, whether your emotions are high or you're more of a sensitive person, it's still like your feelings are still valid, and it doesn't matter what you're experiencing or what you're going through, how old you are, how young you are. If you feel a certain way, you're allowed to feel that feeling. And if you feel that you want to reach out for support, you absolutely should, if that's something you want to do.
Absolutely.
My next question is, can people feel lonely if they are a part of a social group, a friendship group, or if they are surrounded by people? I find this question interesting when we talk about the feelings of disconnect within yourself. So if you have friends and you are potentially in regular contact with those friends, can you still feel loneliness and social disconnection?
And we're coming back to this. You've used the word disconnect. I'll keep using that word. And sometimes for people who feel a sense of disconnect, they will actually avoid large groups, and they'll avoid parties, and they'll avoid crowds, and they'll avoid hanging with their friends because it actually creates a contrast. And they may have a sense of intense loneliness when they might actually even feel more lonely when they're with other people, because this disconnect now is quite apparent. But once again, I'm going to go back to the idea of connection to self. When we have a good, strong connection to self, what happens then is that we connect far more easily with other people, because our connection to other people isn't coming from a need base. I need to know that I'm likable. I need to know that people want me to be their friend. I need to know that I'm okay.
Yeah, that's such a good point to bring up.
Yes. So when we have a good connection to ourselves, you can actually see it. I feel like we even walk just a little bit taller.
Yeah.
A bit straighter, because there's a sense of self-worth, a sense of value of self. And that then actually fuels our ability to connect more easily with other people.
Yeah, I've had a few experiences growing up where I've hung out with some friends or been in a social setting in a group, and I've still felt unfulfilled socially, or I've still felt maybe a bit disconnected. And I think it's really interesting because although maybe you have friends or you're socially connected some ways, you can still feel disconnected for sure.
Absolutely. I had someone once describe me as a square peg in a round hole. Another person said, "Excellent, you're so unique." And I thought, it doesn't feel nice to be unique sometimes.
Yeah. I think especially growing up as an adolescent, the word unique is often potentially associated with something sort of negative or not a compliment. Whereas now, if somebody called me unique, I would be taking that as a compliment and walking a bit taller, you know. But
yes.
Yeah,
Please tell me that I'm weird.
yeah, absolutely. We've spoken a lot about COVID-19 and having the lockdowns and how that's been quite difficult. How did you cope through lockdown? Was there any challenges? How did you feel being away from your friends and your social support systems?
Yeah, I was able to keep in touch with family via Zoom. I did a lot of Zoom. I did a lot of telehealth. I did a lot on my computer. I did hear someone say that even though your family is two suburbs away, they might as well be on the other side of the world, because we still couldn't see each other. And I thought that was an interesting comment. And so that sense of disconnect was alleviated by making sure that we did stay in touch with each other. But what I did, my struggle through lockdown wasn't so much a sense of loneliness. For me, it was the restorative things. The restorative things like going for bushwalks, walking along the beach. And when, for Melbourne, we were in and out of lockdown, in lockdown, out of lockdown, in lockdown, out of lockdown. For the many people I spoke to, the one practice that they couldn't seem to get their routine back was the self-restorative, the going to the gym, going to the pool, getting, the sporting stuff, the exercise, the getting into the bush, going to the beach. These are the things that can actually help nurture that connection to self.
Yes, absolutely. I feel like there's that disconnect from having that time with yourself. I found myself, as I enjoy spending time alone and doing things myself, I would consider myself an independent person. But for some reason, throughout the lockdown, although I was quite busy in my schedule, I felt the need to constantly be doing something and constantly sort of stimulating myself, whether I was watching something or like using the internet. And I felt like I also really lost that sense of restorative self-practice behaviors that I would be used to doing. I feel like that did affect me as well. Absolutely.
Yes. And I love it when people do this, and I am being sarcastic. Well, if you were your own client, what would you say to you? I would say go for a walk in the bush, but I can't.
But you can't, yeah.
I know what I need.
Yeah, absolutely. I know what I need, but I'm just not able to do it.
That's right.
How would you say that COVID has impacted people's feelings of loneliness? Would you say that it is not being able to do those restorative behaviors, those practices of self-care, or through the connection, the disruption of the usual routine? What would you say would be some of those effects that have come out through those?
Well, one of the things that has come out, like now going back to the Black Dog Institute, suggests that 50% of people claimed that they experienced loneliness during lockdown. One of the things I was going to say before too was we need to pay attention to when we are experiencing our loneliness. For some people, it might be in the evening. For some people, it's on the weekend. What I did find though is that this is it's been very interesting I've been going back into primary schools this past few weeks and watching the way I've said this to quite a few parents that when we were in lockdown and our children are doing everything via remote learning, what they weren't getting were those silly conversations that they have with their friends where they're just all giggles and they're saying all these silly things and no adult is listening in, telling them that you're being inappropriate. Whether it's toilet humor or just a silly thing that someone made a silly noise, And it's been interesting watching all of this. And for me, I think they're trying to catch up on all of their silly conversations that they like to have.
Yeah.
I had quite a few clients, though, the ones who struggled with the introverts and extroverts alike, who struggled with lockdown because their sense of their identity in relation to how they connected with their peers was now gone and their teachers.
Yeah, that's a massive disruption.
They were no longer having incidental conversations or just that conversation at lunchtime or recess, as we said. They felt, quite a few commented that they felt that they had been reduced to just what they handed in.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
the only way they could be known by their teachers was by their work.
Yeah, not their character.
And not their character. And so for some students or some children, their whole sense of identity and their place in their social group, their place in their classroom, their place where they sat, got quite disrupted by all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a little brother who actually started year 7 last year throughout all of the lockdowns. And I'm pretty sure he only had 1 or 2 friends from the primary school go to the same high school. So I know he found it really tough to sort of try and make a place in a new sort of school with a new routine and sort of adjusting to that massive step from year 6 to year 7 and having to do that all online. I could imagine how hard it would have been for him and all of the other kids doing remote learning and the parents. So my next question is, what advice would you give to someone who has gotten used to these feelings of loneliness or is used to the lockdowns and having their inside house routines? What advice would you give them to reach out and reconnect with their friends and family, especially for those who are feeling a little bit nervous to re-enter society after the ongoing, quite consistent lockdowns, especially here in Melbourne?
Yeah. Well, this is when, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge that too. Once we have this, when we're getting in a pattern, we have this feeling of loneliness, which then might feel us feel a bit down. We're feeling disconnected. The idea, and that itself, one of the long-term effects of like chronic loneliness can be a sense of fatigue. It can be just a sense of energy depletion. For a long term, we actually can go into sort of like cardio concerns. But this idea of, we're not getting, as I said, those happiness hormones aren't getting released in our mind. And so we know we need to reach out, but it's just so much trouble. And what if no one talks to me? And now it exacerbates the loneliness. And so we actually start spinning and spiraling a bit as well.
Yeah.
And so we end up in this vicious cycle. And it actually is quite counterintuitive to say, just going to get myself out there and get myself connected. But, what if? And then we there's our brain stories again. What if? Remember, the suffering is a result of the stories our mind is telling us, And so whether it's nobody likes me, or what if I reach out and no one is going to respond, and what if I send a message and I can see that they've read it but they don't answer me, and what if I say the wrong thing? And then we get caught up in that story.
That cycle.
Absolutely. So I think it's important to acknowledge that, yes, that does take place, but we need to create space, or we need to make decisions. So actually behavioral decisions too, for the sake of my well-being, I will reach out to another person for the sake of my future. Because we'll also acknowledge that feeling lonely, staying at home, we're very comfortable in our little bubble at home, might be safe, but it's not good over a long term.
Yeah.
So when I talk to young people about this, and we say, tell me about this. Oh, it's very safe. Okay, so what's it going to look like in 5 years' time?
Yeah.
What's this going to be like? Yeah, what will this be like for future you? So for the sake of future you, we need to start making some changes now.
Yeah, definitely.
But they don't have to be big changes. They can just be small ones. Often I'll encourage someone to say, I want you to make one message to one person this week. Who will it be and what day will it be on?
Yeah.
Let's start with
those
one.
Plans. Yeah, those sort of baby steps.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How would you navigate the space of someone feeling like they're ready to get out there post-lockdown, they're ready to connect with their friends, they still want to be independent and do things for themselves and by themselves? How would you sort of navigate that self-care, alone time element with the worry of fear of missing out, that sort of FOMO? I know a lot of people I have spoken to in my sort of friend group or in my extended circles after lockdown, we all started feeling overwhelmed because we were so excited to see our friends and start making social plans and filling up that social calendar. But afterwards, we had realized that we were actually a little bit nervous to go back out and interact with new people and sort of be with our friends again. But I also didn't want to not attend anything, or I didn't want to cancel any plans because I didn't want to have that fear of missing out, that sort of FOMO, which I know is very common among young people.
Yeah, Absolutely. And I think one of the things I did mention to quite a few people was that our socializing muscles had gone into atrophy.
Yes.
And
Definitely.
especially for the introvert who
Yeah.
has spent a long time developing their ability to socialize, it's like they really had to start doing this. And funny, I have had someone else say exactly what you've just said, that they booked up all these things and suddenly it's like, too much.
Too much. Absolutely.
Too much. But I want to talk about FOMO in that sense of we get caught up in these, like I said, we get caught up in the feeling of loneliness and we don't ask questions as to what is it that I'm thinking that's making me feel this way. When we get caught up into FOMO, we just know we feel uncomfortable and we don't want to miss out. We know that. And so we stop at that idea. So one of the things I encourage people to do is to get curious and to start asking yourself some questions. So, for example, the fear of missing out. What is it that you're afraid you're going to miss out on? And if a person wants to say, well, I'm going to miss out on conversations, I'm going to miss out on seeing what happens, I'm going to miss out on, keeping up with everything. Well, the next question is, and what's so bad about that?
Yes. Yeah.
And we actually need to ask that same sort of question, like, so why are you afraid of that? And when we've asked that question a few times over, let's just run through a scenario.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a fear of missing out. What are you afraid of missing out on? I'm afraid of missing out on seeing people, afraid of missing out on conversations. So why are you afraid of missing out on that? Well, because if I'm not there, then they might forget me, or they may not include me. And why are you afraid of that? Because, well, then I won't feel valued.
And won't feel liked.
And I won't feel liked. And when I feel liked, I know that I am likable.
Yes. Yes.
And so we've just dug a little hole there.
Yeah.
And now we're back to a disconnection from self.
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of asking yourself those questions. What are you actually missing out on? And it's almost like saying to yourself, whatever you want to do, instead of going to this event, if that feels more important to you, then what are you missing out on? I heard this nice quote from somewhere, and someone was saying, I really don't want to go to this event on the weekend or this gathering, and I'd really rather stay in bed and watch TV. I don't want to go. And then the other person had said, well, tell them you have plans. And the other person responded saying, well, I don't have plans. I just want to stay in bed and watch TV and just chill by myself. And the person on the other end said, well, that is plans and that is a good enough reason to not go. So I thought that was really, really nice to hear and sort of comforting when you're going through that cycle of fear of missing out.
Yes, absolutely. And look, the book Quiet, which is written by Susan Cain regarding introverts, is about the idea of validating that it's okay to be quiet. It's okay to withdraw. It's okay. It's valid. It has a place.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Why would you say it is important to reduce feelings of loneliness or social isolation within a community?
Look, there's been government initiatives on this one too, where there's been, there've been programs have created to help bring about connection. It would be also in line with mental health. It's all part of good mental health. There's also the fact that there are long-term effects, which include blood pressure, cholesterol, risk of developing cardiovascular disease. This is for the long-term sense of loneliness. But it is important for there to be connection, and connection and community run beautifully together. So we've talked about connection to self. We've talked about that loneliness is often a result of disconnect. But one thing the word we haven't said yet this evening is the word community.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that there are a variety of communities within a community.
Yes, definitely.
That's right. And that's why we have these initiatives that invite people to connect in, to join in, and to meet with others of similar interests.
Mm-hmm.
And as I mentioned, earlier on, we talked about social media groups, people reaching out and searching. People will search the social media to find groups and to for that sense of connection, for that sense of community. And you will see messages pop up and say, "Hi, this is the first time I've written, but I really need a safe place."
Yes.
And the idea of the safe place or the safe space or the safe community is something that is incredibly important.
Yeah, definitely. So you would say that there are some definitive physical health problems or symptoms that could occur from long-term feelings of loneliness or isolation that could definitely impact somebody further than just that initial feeling of loneliness.
Yeah. And as to whether it was just loneliness or just that ongoing experience of those unpleasant, unwanted emotions that have the ability to render us inactive.
Yes. Yeah.
And we'll crawl under the doona and stay there.
Yes. Absolutely. So lastly, but not least, my question for you is, what are some strategies that young people and our listeners can do to sort of break this cycle of loneliness, and any other take-home messages you'd like to share with us?
Okay. Well, connect with others. Reach out, find groups. Social media has helped reduce isolation by making it possible to connect to other groups. For some people, especially for the introverts, they just want one or two good friends who just need a nice, meaty conversation. For the extroverts, the idea of it's not possible to have too many friends. So reach out to others. But it's so important, very important, and I'm going to say it again, to get to know yourself, to be able to connect with yourself, and to give yourself the message that you're okay. And that you can do this. Yes. So this is the difference. A connection to yourself turns loneliness and isolation into solitude and restoration. So when we're feeling disconnected, we have isolation and loneliness. When we're feeling connected, either to ourselves or even just one other person, then that alone time isn't alone time. We're still there.
Yeah, it's that
We're
time
with it everywhere we go.
Yeah, always.
And it can turn it into a peaceful, blissful place of solitude.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for coming along today and chatting with us about loneliness and how it can impact youth, and giving us some advice on ways that we can break that cycle of loneliness, and some really other good insights about getting to know yourself and being a good friend to yourself first as well. I'll now pass back over to the Community Heart Show.
Okay, thank you for having me. All the best.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
That show tonight, really, really good. And Emily and Gwen, great insights there into the whole subject of youth loneliness. And thanks for your time. And I'm sure the listeners really enjoyed it. Julio, what did you think, mate?
That was really good. Learned some good tips, especially managing myself back again out of my doona, getting Mark a cat, getting him involved in stuff, and getting him exercising. I think I've got some real good tips at the moment.
Yeah, it's great. Now, it would be good, interesting, Julio, to see what our visitors, our listeners are thinking. We've got Jen Calder Chandler says, congratulations, Emily and Gwen. A wonderful podcast, some wonderful tips on reaching out. Thank you. Look, it's great to see some listeners. Other listeners would love to hear from you about some of your thoughts about the podcast. Really well led there, Emily, too. Very proud of you and what you brought to the podcast.
Thanks so much.
Really
Yes,
good. And
that's good.
Gwen, your insights are really, really, really helpful. And look, even Milton, you got a cut from Milton, so that says something. He's been a hard judge of these shows. So
Yes.
together, well done, girls, from him is that's
Thank you.
nearly as good as you can get.
That's right.
And then Belinda, such a great show. Thanks for your time, Gwen. Congratulations, Emily, on your first podcast. There you go, Julio. First podcast.
Nice.
So exciting.
Yes.
I tell you what, Emily's already got a fan club, eh?
Yes. Started already.
It's really, really good. Now, we always like ending the show with a few little tips that people can go ahead. So we sort of summarize the show. Julio, I don't know about you, we'll get 5, but I was interested in the FOMO, Gwen, the FOMO stuff, because I honestly, I don't want to be mean to the guy because, not many, we got to keep this between us, but I reckon Julio's got a bit of FOMO. So, I think he's got a lot of FOMO, and I just wondering what advice you'd give him, because he did pay attention to that bit about FOMO. What would you be saying to Julio to get over his FOMO?
Well, I think Julio and I would have to talk privately about that and find out.
Oh, no, it's okay. This is private. This is all private.
Yes.
Don't worry. Just go for it, all right?
We'll have to find out, what is he really afraid of missing out on?
That's a good question, Julio. Can you be honest with us, mate? What are you afraid of missing out on?
Wow, well, lots of things. At the moment, missing out on staying in my doona, staying in my house, my little nest.
What do you think, Gwen, most people are afraid of missing out on? It's just that lack of appreciation, that lack of connection, thinking that no one loves them? Is that what it's all about, their own needs? Or
I think it has a lot to do with that feeling of being disconnected or feeling left out, and feeling that they will, something's going to happen without them and they won't know. And
it's
maybe
like
there's
rejection. Is it like it's like being rejected?
A bit of a need to know, and we crave connection, and this goes back to our primitive brain of not wanting to be kicked out of the cave and being eaten by saber-toothed tigers. Apparently,
goes back that far.
Apparently, yes, that's what some say.
I'm old, but I'm not that old.
But we need connection, and that idea of not wanting to be excluded. We want to be included, and if it means we have to get ourselves in there to be included, sometimes we will.
Okay, now Gene Chandler reckons it's about personal security, a lack of personal security, which is probably pretty true. If you're not confident in yourself, I mean, some people are just too independent, aren't they, Gene? Some people really don't care what anyone thinks of them, and some people care too much.
Yes.
What makes those people so different?
Connection to self and liking self without being completely up yourself, if that makes any sense at all. So it's good to have a realistic connection to yourself, a realistic evaluation of yourself, and to actually be your own best friend. And that is what energizes you to be able to connect to other people from a place of fullness and energy, rather than I need to have these friends telling me that I'm okay.
Right.
Well, I tell you what, Gwen, you're going to be booked out after tonight for your business counselling business. I think Milton might want to get involved, but he reckons that some people are on their phone too much. Can't put it down for 30 seconds. I don't know who he's referring to there, but
no idea.
At least Gene Chandler thinks I'm saying a couple of good things here, which is great. Thanks, Gene. It's great to have your support tonight.
Yes.
Yes. Well, so the Youth Are Not Alone project, Emily, how can people support it? Like, what support does Big Brothers Big Sisters and the Youth Are Not Alone project need?
So we would love to have your support over on our Instagram page. It is at Youth Are Not Alone. We would love to hear from you for any topics you would like us to talk about on the podcast as well. Anything that you feel maybe your formal education missed out on, or things that maybe you feel are a little bit taboo or too personal, and they weren't talked about in school, or if you want to hear more about FOMO and personal things like that, let us know over there. We would love to have your support. And next year, we're hoping to have in-person events as well, where we can get a group of people together, working on a project and meeting new people. So if you would like to be a part of that next year, definitely follow our Instagram at Youth Are Not Alone.
Fantastic. So, Julio, we've got to wind up the show, unfortunately. It's 98.9 Northwest FM. It's Community Heart Radio. And next week, we're going to have another podcast, the second one in the series, Emily. So really looking forward to that. Can you just give us some insights into the second one?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't want to spoil too much because we want you all to tune in. But the next episode will be about anxiety and how people experience anxiety and ways that people can cope through those feelings of anxiety. I know Gwen and I mentioned today that she doesn't like to label emotions or feelings as too negative. So it'll be interesting to see if we can make a positive tie for anxiety as well. And we'll be talking about how anxiety can impact your day-to-day life and youth as well. So it'll be very interesting. Make sure you tune in.
Yep.
Well, what do you reckon, Julio? If you got over your FOMO, and hopefully next week you might learn how to handle your anxiety.
No, you're true. Then I'll be all covered. I'll be set up for the rest of the year.
Mate, you'll be fixed up, mate. You'll be pumping after next week.
Yes.
We're going to sort of wind it up now. Gwen, is there anything you'd want to sort of, how would you sort of want to sum up tonight, trying to address the whole issue of youth loneliness?
I'd say be prepared to unhook from that feeling. We get very caught up in the feeling of being lonely, and our feelings are constantly changing, but our feelings are not who we are. And so we need to be able to step back from the feeling and then tune into what our mind is telling us. But then self-care, connect with our friends, connect with family, do what we need to do to change that story and get some help if you need it.
There you go.
I like that one. I think I've made a new friend, Jean Chandler, I think has become my good friend tonight. So I'm going to try and connect a bit more with her. Julio, what have you learned out of tonight, mate?
I've learned that I'm FOMO, apparently. So that's one thing I learned. Get away from my anxieties. I'm going to learn next week, so that'll be good as well. So I'm starting to change already and get out more often. Get out in the bush. Enjoy nature.
That's fantastic, Julio. You are a bit of a long-term project, mate, but we'll try and help you here on Community Heart Radio every week. We're going to try and help you, buddy. Emily,
Thanks.
some final words from yourself?
Yeah, I think something I really took from the segment today is that looking for those feelings of disconnection, it's really important to look into yourself and sort of lean into those feelings and think about perhaps why you're feeling that way. And I think also going back to the idea of self-care and doing those things that make you feel fulfilled and sort of being your own best friend is something that I've definitely taken away from today. And for me personally is definitely a work in progress, but I feel I'm equipped with the right resources now to do so. So thank you so much, Gwen, for coming along.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tonight's podcast. Really good, Julio. Great stuff with the technical stuff. Jean, fantastic having you on board again. Emily, you're a podcast superstar. Really great having you all here, eh?
Thanks so much.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us this evening. Tune in every Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. or watch us on YouTube, Facebook, and follow us on LinkedIn and other social media.